We now welcome in Stefan Bondy, the Daily News Knicks beat writer who's at the Garden. Steph, as I mentioned, he suffered a similar injury against the Heat, but how would you describe what the mood was like in the Garden when KP fell after falling into Antetokounmpo?
Yeah, I mean, it was different because the other injury was just his ankle. When he fell this time, he was clutching his knee. He was writhing in pain. So everybody sort of knew that this was a big problem. There was hope that it wasn't an ACL, but it turned out to be. The mood, though, was dire immediately. They showed Steve Mills and Scott Perry on the MSG telecast, and they looked just absolutely distraught. And when we were in the locker room, there was also a sense that this could be bad. This was before the news about the ACL injury. And as Kenner said, he'd be praying for Porzingis. So, unfortunately, the news was bad. Heading into what would have been Porzingis' first All-Star game, too.
Take us back into that locker room and just expand on that a little bit. You mentioned what Enes Kanter had to say, but, I guess players know. I mean, they saw it right in front of their eyes. How would you describe the mood in that locker room when they sort of had an idea that it was worse than just a sprain?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of talk of, hey, we hope he's okay, and, if he's not okay, it's next man up. That's got to be the mentality of the athlete. I say out of anybody, though, as I mentioned, Enes Kanter was more distraught than any of the other players we talked to. Tim Hardaway Jr., who like you said, suffered his own injury, he was optimistic that it wasn't as bad as it ended up being. But this was just an overall really bad night for the Knicks. I mean, you mentioned Tim Hardaway Jr.'s injury. Enes Kanter now has to go have surgery on his mouth as well. I mean, this was a doomsday scenario for the Knicks.
That is the word. So now, what's the realistic timetable for KP to return?
I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, he has to have surgery. Now, players in the past, when they do have ACL surgery and recoveries, it usually takes about 9 months until he's back on the court, sometimes longer. There's been guys who've been out for over a year, and when you have a guy as big as Kristaps Porzingis, he doesn't weigh as much, but his height at 7'3", he puts a lot of strain on those knees. I assume they're going to take their time with him, be precautious, and this is definitely going to seep into next season. There's no question about that.
All right, so as we both mentioned, Scott Perry and Steve Mills were in attendance. If the franchise player is out, let's just guess until at least February of 2019, what now is plan B for how you rebuild this franchise?
Well, I mean, they have to hit it big in the draft. At this point, there's no reason to go for that playoff spot. All right, that's out of the picture. I know, the coach is going to keep saying we're fighting for that playoff spot, and players are going to say the same thing. But really, there's no point in that, moving forward. That draft pick heading into the summer is really their best asset in terms of upgrading the roster. They're not going to have much cap space, so they need to hit a home run with that. And like you mentioned, I mean, we're talking till February till Kristaps Porzingis is going to be back to 100%. So next season, you have to start thinking is also one of those rebuilding years that they're not going to get much out of in terms of victories. So really, this is about getting the draft pick, developing players like Frank Ntilikina, and hoping for the best in free agency of 2019. Like I said, this is devastating news.
Stefan, you had the perfect word, doomsday. Thank you very much for hopping on here and helping us out with the Knicks information. Stefan Bondy, Knicks beat writer for the Daily News.